Oh my God.
The stable had been locked from the inside. Not nailed shut, not chained. Locked. Like someone wanted whatever was inside to stay hidden until morning. When the ranch hands finally forced the door open at first light, the smell of fresh hay mixed with something else, something alive, warm, and softly breathing. Lying in the corner was a newborn foal, unlike any they had ever seen. Too small. Too quiet. Marked with strange patterns along her coat that didn't belong to any bloodline on the ranch. And beside her, a single envelope. No name, no return address. Just a few carefully written lines that would turn a quiet ranch upside down. Who locked the stable? Why leave a newborn behind? And how could a few words written before dawn change the future of an entire valley? This isn't just a horse story. This is a Wild West mystery that rewrote a ranch's destiny. Before we ride deeper into this story, take a second to support MR West Tales. If you enjoy heartfelt Wild West tales, mysterious ranch stories, and unforgettable horse legends, tap like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves the old frontier spirit. It helps the channel more than you know, and it keeps these stories alive. Now, let's step back into that locked stable. The morning came quietly to the ranch, the way it always did. No wind. No birds calling yet. Just that pale, early light stretching over the valley, touching the fence posts, the dry grass, the long shadows of the barns. It was the kind of calm that made you believe nothing could possibly be wrong. And yet, something was. Old Thomas Reed felt it before he saw it. He'd been running cattle and horses for more than 40 years, long enough to trust that uneasy tug in his chest. Some folks called it instinct. Others called it experience. Thomas just called it listening to the land. He stopped halfway across the yard and stared at the east stable. The door was shut. That alone wasn't strange. What was strange was the iron lock hanging from it, fresh, clean, untouched by rust. Thomas frowned. That stable hadn't been locked in years. Not since the old days when horse thieves still haunted the valley and men slept with rifles by their beds. He walked closer, boots crunching softly in the dirt. The air smelled of dew and hay, but there was something else too. Warm, living, new. Anyone lock this up last night? He called out. No answer. One by one, the ranch hands gathered. Eli, Jonah, young Matt, barely 19, and still learning how to read a horse's ears. They all stared at the lock, each man quietly doing the same thing running through last night in his head. No one was in there. Eli said finally. Last check was before sunset. Empty stalls. Thomas reached out and touched the lock. Cold, solid. Whoever closed it had done so carefully, intentionally. That's when they heard it. A sound so soft you could miss it if you weren't listening for trouble. A gentle, uneven breath. Not a whinny, not a cry. Just life. Matt swallowed. Sir, he said, voice low, there's something inside. For a moment, no one moved. You have to understand something about ranches like this. They're built on routine. Every gate, every stall, every animal has its place. When something breaks that order, it doesn't just raise questions. It raises alarms. Thomas nodded once. Get the crowbar. The metal groaned as they forced the door open. Old hinges complained, gust falling like powder from the frame. And when the door finally gave way, the smell rolled out, first fresh straw, warm hide, and the unmistakable scent of birth. There, in the far corner, lay a mare they didn't recognize. Or rather, what lay beside her. The mare was exhausted, sides heaving, eyes dark but calm. And pressed close to her chest was a newborn foal, still damp, legs folded awkwardly beneath her small body. She was tiny, smaller than any healthy foal Thomas had ever seen. But that wasn't what made the men freeze. It was her coat. Drk along the spine, fading into pale silver at the flanks, marked with faint, almost brushstroke-like lines that looked painted rather than grown. No brand, no ranch markings, no known bloodline. Jonah whispered what they were all thinking. She ain't right. But she ain't wrong either. The foal lifted her head slightly. Her eyes opened clear, alert, watching, not frightened, not confused, just quietly aware. That's when Eli noticed the envelope. It sat on a wooden crate near the stall door, clean and dry, like it had been placed there with care. No dust, no dirt, no name, just a letter. Thomas picked it up, his fingers rough against the smooth paper. He didn't open it yet. He just held it, weighing it like it might bite. Someone locked this place from the inside, Matt said slowly. Left Amare, a newborn, and walked out before dawn? No one answered, because there was no good answer. They moved carefully then, gently. Water for the mare, fresh hay. A quick check to make sure the foal was breathing right, legs straightening, heart strong. Despite her size, she showed no signs of weakness. If anything, she clung to life with quiet determination. Thomas stepped back and finally opened the letter. The handwriting was neat but tired, like someone forcing steady lines through shaking hands. He read silently at first, then out loud. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. This foal does not belong to any man who would sell her, race her, or break her for pride. She was born of hardship and meant for more than coin. Keep her safe. Let her grow. The truth will reveal itself in time. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just a promise and a burden. The men stood there, the weight of those words settling over the stable like a second roof. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the morning fog, but inside, everything felt suspended. Could be stolen? Jonah muttered. Someone trying to dump trouble on us. Or running from worse trouble, Eli replied. Thomas said nothing. He was watching the foal.
She'd managed to stand now, legs shaking but stubborn. She wobbled, corrected herself, and leaned into her mother. No panic, no fear, just focus. That's when Thomas felt it again, that pull in his chest. This ranch was built on taking in what others turn away from, he said finally. Broken horses, lost cattle, men with nowhere else to go. He folded the letter carefully. We don't sell her. We don't move her. Not yet. Matt looked relieved. What do we call her? Thomas thought for a moment. Then he shook his head. Not yet. Names have weight. Let her earn one. As they closed the stable door, this time without a lock, none of them realized they were standing at the beginning of something much larger than a mystery. They thought they were sheltering a strange foal. They had no idea they were protecting the future of the ranch itself. And somewhere beyond the valley, before the sun had even risen, someone was already riding far away, hoping, praying that they had made the right choice. By the third morning, the whole valley knew something strange had happened at Reed Ranch. Ranches talk, even when people don't. A rider stops by for salt. A neighbor notices extra tracks in the dirt. Someone hears that a stable was forced open at dawn. By the time the sun set on the second day, curiosity had already begun to circle the place like hawks riding warm air. But inside the east stable, time moved differently. The foal had survived her first night without trouble, and that alone surprised everyone. She was still smaller than she should have been, ribs faint under her coat, legs thin as fence wire. Yet every hour, she seemed a little steadier, a little stronger. What puzzled Thomas most wasn't her size, it was her calm. Most newborns startled at shadows, flinched at sudden sounds. This one didn't. She watched. She listened. When a hand reached toward her, she didn't shy away. She leaned in, curious, as if she were studying the world instead of fearing it. She looks like she's thinking, Matt said one afternoon, crouched in the straw. Like there's something going on behind those eyes. Jonah snorted. You're seeing things. But Thomas didn't dismiss it. He'd seen thousands of horses in his life. Nervous ones, mean ones, smart ones. This foal carried herself differently. Not proud, not timid, just aware. They checked her over carefully. No signs of illness. Heart steady, lungs clear. teeth just beginning to show. The mare, too, was in decent shape, though clearly worn. Old scars crossed her legs, faint but real. She'd been ridden hard at some point. Maybe worked cattle. Maybe worse. And still, no brand. That alone raised eyebrows. Out here, nearly every horse bore a mark. Ranch pride, ownership, history burned in a hide. A horse without one was either wild or deliberately kept unclaimed. Someone didn't want her traced, Eli said quietly. Thomas nodded, but didn't want her owned. They tried feeding the full, supplemental milk, but she refused it, stubbornly nudging back toward her mother. Despite everything, she drank strong, lived strong, and yet questions piled up faster than answers. Where'd she been born? Why here? Why locked inside a stable instead of turned loose nearby? And most of all, why the letter? The words stayed with Thomas, replaying in his mind as he walked the fence line each evening. Meant for more than coin. That wasn't how most folks talked about horses. Horses were work. Horses were trade. Horses were livelihood. Unless there was something else. By the fourth day, visitors started coming by accidentally. A neighboring rancher leaned against the fence a little too long. A trader asked casual questions he already knew the answers to. Even a sheriff rode through, tipping his hat and pretending he hadn't heard a thing. Thomas told them all the same story. Found her abandoned. We're taking care of her. No details. No explanations. But eyes lingered on the stable, and not all of them felt friendly. That evening, a storm rolled in fast. Wind whipped the grass flat. Thunder cracked sharp and close, the kind that rattled windows and nerves alike. Matt was the first to notice the foal's reaction. She didn't panic. While the mare shifted nervously and stamped, the foal stood close, ears forward, listening to the thunder like it was a language she almost understood. When lightning split the sky, she blinked but didn't bolt. That ain't normal, Matt whispered. Thomas stood beside him. Neither is surviving what she survived. During the storm, the mare grew restless, breathing heavy. For a tense hour, Thomas worried she might collapse. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the storm passed. The mare settled. The foal lay down beside her, unafraid. The next morning brought another surprise. Hoofprints. Fresh ones. Right outside the east stable. Not from any of their horses. Too narrow. Too deliberate. Someone had come back. Thomas crouched, studying the ground. The track stopped near the door, turned once, then headed away toward the creek. Whoever it was hadn't tried to open the stable. Hadn't knocked. They just looked. Eli clenched his jaw. You think it's the one who left her? Maybe, Thomas said. Or maybe someone else who knows what she is. That sentence hung heavy. Because by now, the men were starting to suspect the truth. This wasn't a random act of desperation. It was a decision. A careful one. Someone had chosen Reed Ranch for a reason. And that meant the foal mattered. That afternoon, Thomas finally made the call. He burned the brand. Not onto the foal, but onto the stable door. A simple mark. Reed Ranch. Ownership claimed, not of the horse, but of her safety. This means we protect her, he told the hands. From buyers. From rumors. From folks asking the wrong questions. Matt hesitated. What if the letter's wrong? What if she's just a horse? Thomas smiled faintly. Then we'll have done right by a horse. That night, as the valley slept, the foal stood beneath the stars for the first time. She lifted her head, sniffed the air, and took a few uncertain steps into the open. She didn't run. She didn't stray. She stayed close to the people who had chosen her. And far away, beyond the hills, someone felt a strange easing in their chest, like a promise was finally being kept. Because the foal no one claimed was already beginning to claim the ranch. And a letter? It hadn't lied. For nearly a week, the letter stayed folded inside Thomas Reed's jacket. Not because he'd forgotten about it, because some things carried weight, and weight demanded the right moment. Out on the range, men talked around the mystery, but never straight through it. The foal grew stronger by the day, legs filling out, steps gaining confidence. She followed her mother closely, memorizing every sound of the ranch. Gates creaking, spurs clinking, wind humming through wire. But the words in that letter kept knocking at Thomas's thoughts, asking questions the land itself couldn't answer. Born of hardship, meant for more than coin. The truth will reveal itself in time. Time, Thomas decided, had arrived. It was late evening when he gathered the hands inside the main barn. The sun dipped low, turning the sky the color of old copper. Horses shifted in their stalls, sensing the change in mood the way animals always do. Matt leaned against the post. Eli stood with arms crossed. Jonah rested his hat against his knee. No one spoke. They were all waiting for the same thing. Thomas unfolded the letter carefully. The paper was creased now, softened from handling, but the ink was still clear. "There's more to this than we thought," he said, "and you all deserve to hear it." He read the letter again, slowly this time. Let the words breathe. Then he turned the page. The men leaned forward. On the back, written in fainter ink, like it had been added in a hurry, were lines Thomas hadn't read out loud before. Her mother was once known beyond this valley. People will come looking, not to save her, but to claim her. If they find her too early, she will disappear into a life she was never meant for. Trust her strength. When she runs, you'll understand. Silence filled the barn. Matt swallowed. Known how? Eli's voice was tight. Racehorse. Jonah shook his head. No one leaves a race foal like that. Thomas nodded slowly. I don't think this was about speed alone. He'd spent the past few days digging quietly. Old ledgers, old stories, conversations that started casual and ended with uneasy pauses. And one name kept floating to the surface. Silver Crow. Years ago, nearly 15 now, there had been a mare by that name. Fast, smart, too smart for her own good. She'd run the open range like she owned it, winning long-distance trials and outrunning every stallion they paired her with. People said she could read land the way men read maps. And then she vanished. Some said she was stolen. Others said she was run into the ground by greedy owners. A few swore she escaped into the hills and was never seen again. But Silver Crow had one mark people never forgot, a silver-gray streak along her spine. The foal in the east pasture lifted her head at that moment, ears twitching. Thomas looked out through the open barn doors. There she stood, sunlight catching the faint silver line already beginning to show through her coat. She's Silver Crow's blood, Thomas said quietly. Maybe her last. The realization hit like a slow thunderclap. If word got out, men with money would come. Not ranchers, investors, buyers who saw horses as numbers and names on paper. The kind who broke spirits faster than legs. That night, Thomas took the letter back to the house. He sat alone at the table, lantern light flickering across the words. And for the first time, he noticed something else. Indented marks, as if more had been written and erased. He held the paper to the light. Shadows revealed faint outlines beneath the ink. A name, not of the writer, but of the foal. Asherah. Thomas leaned back, breath slow. Names had weight, and this one felt like a promise wrapped in ash and flame. Before dawn, he made a decision. The next morning, the ranch woke to activity. Horses saddled early. Fences checked twice. And Thomas rode out to see the sheriff. Not to report anything, but to ask a question. Anyone been asking about a silver-marked foal? Thomas asked casually. The sheriff paused a second too long. Heard a whisper, he said, from men passing through. Offering good money. How good? The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Enough to ruin a place that wasn't careful. That was all Thomas needed to hear. Back at the ranch, he gathered the hands again. We're keeping her quiet, he said. No visitors. No talk. If anyone asks, she's just another ranch-born filly. Matt nodded. And if they don't believe us? Thomas smiled thinly. Then they'll have to. Days passed. The foal grew bolder. She tested her legs, stretching into long, smooth strides that barely disturbed the ground. She didn't gallop wildly like other young horses. She ran like she was measuring the world, counting steps, reading distance. One evening, as the sun dropped low, Matt watched her run the fence line. Sir, he said, all in his voice, she ain't running away. Thomas watched closely. No, she's learning. And then it happened. A rider appeared on the ridge. Just one. Still. Watching. The foal stopped running. Turned. Looked straight at the figure in the distance. No fear. Only recognition. The rider tipped his hat. then turned and disappeared. Thomas exhaled slowly. Whoever had left her knew she was safe. For now, the letter had done more than explain the past. It had drawn a line between what the ranch was and what it was about to become. Because Asherah, though they still didn't speak her name aloud, was no longer just a mystery. She was a responsibility, and soon she would be a legend. By the time autumn rolled in, the ranch no longer felt the same. Nothing visible had changed at first glance. The fences stood where they always had. The barns creaked in the same places. The cattle moved with the seasons like they always had. But beneath the routine, something had shifted, quietly, deeply, like a river carving a new path underground. And at the center of it all was the filly. Asherah, though her name was still spoken only in hushed moments, had grown into her legs. The awkward wobble of her first days was gone. In its place was balance, control, a kind of precision Thomas had rarely seen outside of fully trained horses. She didn't waste movement. When she ran with purpose. When she stopped, it was exact. She learned gaits after seeing them once. Learned cattle patterns without being taught. It was as if the land itself was explaining things to her, and she was listening. Matt spent the most time with her, usually without realizing it. He'd sit on the fence while she grazed nearby, or walk the pasture while she followed, just close enough to touch but never crowd. She ain't like other horses, he said one evening. Feels like she's choosing us. Thomas nodded. Some horses do. But the changes weren't just in the pasture. Buyers started coming through the valley more often. Too often. Men with clean boots and careful smiles. They asked about cattle prices, then casually drifted toward questions about horses. You got anything young and promising? One asked. Thomas answered with the same calm, every time. Just ranch stock. Still, eyes wandered. Lingering glances followed Asherah when she moved along the fence line, her silver marking now clearer, unmistakable. And word never stays buried. One afternoon, the first offer came. A man named Caldwell rode in with a tidy mustache and a leather satchel. He didn't waste time. I'll give you more than this ranch makes in a year, he said, eyes fixed on the filly. No paperwork. No waiting. Matt stiffened. Jonah swore under his breath. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She's not for sale. Caldwell smiled thinly. Everything's for sale. Thomas stepped closer. Not here. That night, they doubled the watches. Because the next change came fast, and it came hard. Asherah began running the full perimeter of the ranch. Not fleeing, guarding. At dawn and dusk, she traced the fence line like a patrol, stopping at breaks before humans noticed them. When cattle strayed, she nudged them back without biting or panicking them. She learned the ranch faster than some men ever had. She's working, Eli said one morning, stunned. Without being asked, but it was the night of the storm that proved it. Wind howled across the valley, rain slashing sideways. A fence near the lower creek snapped under pressure. Cattle began to drift, spooked and blind. Before anyone saddled up, Asherah was already moving. Through mud and rain, she cut across the pasture, positioning herself at the break. She held the cattle there, stood firm, ears back, presence unshakable, until the men arrived. When the storm cleared, the damage was minimal. Thomas stared at her, soaked and shaking, not from cold, but from realization. She's not just special, he said quietly. She's necessary. From that day on, the ranch leaned on her without meaning to. Work went smoother. Losses dropped. Even the older horses moved differently around her, respectful, alert. But with every change came pressure. Another rider was spotted on the ridge. Then another. Rumors spread of a silver-backed filly worth a fortune. Men who'd never set foot in the valley suddenly knew its name. The sheriff rode out again. You're sitting on trouble, he warned. Big trouble. Thomas nodded. So was Silver Crow. The sheriff sighed. And look how that ended. That night, Thomas finally spoke Asherah's name out loud. The filly lifted her head immediately, walked to him, pressed her forehead gently against his chest. It wasn't affection. It was acknowledgement. The next morning, Thomas made his final decision. He saddled his best horse and rode the boundaries of the ranch. Every fence, Every gate, he spoke with neighbors, old friends, folks who owed him favors, and folks who respected his word. The message was clear. Ashera stays. If men wanted her, they'd have to come through the ranch first. And no one did that lightly anymore. Weeks passed. Then came a test. A group of buyers arrived together. Not polite, not subtle. Money in their pockets, an entitlement in their eyes. They pushed. They threatened. Ashera stood behind Thomas, calm and unmovable. One man stepped forward, and Ashera did too. Just one step, but it was enough. The men backed away, not because of fear, but because they understood something they couldn't buy. This horse belonged here. By winter's edge, the ranch's reputation had changed. People spoke of Reed Ranch differently now, not just as land, but as a place that protected what mattered. Ashera wasn't just part of the ranch anymore. She was the ranch, and everyone could feel it. What no one knew yet was that her greatest impact was still ahead, because legends don't reveal themselves all at once. They wait. The first snowfall came early that year. It dusted the valley in quiet white, softening fence lines and muting the land until the world felt held in a single breath. From the house porch, Thomas Reed watched Ashera move through it. Dark coat cutting clean paths through the frost, silver line along her spine glowing faintly against the pale ground. She was no longer a filly, not fully grown yet, but no longer young in spirit. She carried herself with certainty now, like she understood the weight she bore and accepted it. The ranch had changed around her. Fewer strangers rode through. Fewer questions were asked. Word had spread that Reed Ranch wasn't a place where money spoke louder than values. People still whispered about the silverbacked horse, but the whispers had softened, turned from greed into something closer to respect. Even the land seemed to respond. Cattle losses were down. Fences held longer. Horses worked smoother. And when storms rolled in, Ashera moved first. Always first, checking low ground, circling the herd, standing between danger and the ranch like it was simply her place. One evening, as the fire crackled low in the house, Thomas finally told Matt the full story. About Silver Crow, about the men who pushed her too hard, tried to make her into something profitable instead of something whole. About the night she'd vanished, lame in one leg, but unbroken in spirit. They say she escaped, Thomas said quietly. But I think she was set free. Matt stared into the flames. And Ashera, Thomas smiled faintly. It's the promise that freedom wasn't wasted. Spring came gentle. Ashera grew into her strength fully then. Her stride lengthened, muscles clean and powerful. She ran not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. When she did, people stopped what they were doing just to watch. There was no wild flailing, no panic, just speed, control, purpose. The day she outran the fastest ranch horse without effort, no one cheered. They simply nodded, as if something expected had finally arrived. That same week, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Thomas knew before he opened it. Thank you for choosing her over gold. She was always meant to belong, not to be owned. I can rest now. No name, no signature. Thomas folded the letter carefully and burned it in the stove. Some things weren't meant to be passed around. They were meant to be carried. Years passed. Ashera became a fixture of the valley. Foals learned by following her. Men learned by watching her. She never needed a rider to lead, only direction. And when Thomas grew older, slower, Ashera adjusted. She walked instead of ran, waited instead of pushed. It was as if she understood time the way land does, not as loss, but as change. On the day Thomas passed, the ranch fell silent. No horse moved. Ashera stood by the fence nearest the house, head lowered, breath slow. She didn't panic. She didn't call out. She stayed. At the funeral, people came from all over the valley. Ranchers, riders, folks who'd once tried to buy what wasn't for sale. They spoke of Thomas Reed as a good man. They spoke of Reed Ranch as a place that stood for something. And quietly, without anyone needing to say it, they spoke of the horse. Afterward, Matt took over the ranch. He kept things the same. That was the secret. No expansion, no deals, no shortcuts. Ashera aged gracefully. Her silver marking faded, just enough to look earned rather than given. She no longer ran the perimeter every day, but when trouble came, she was there, always there. On her final morning, Ashera walked to the east pasture, the same place where she'd first stood beneath open sky. Matt found her there, lying peacefully in the grass, eyes closed, body still. No struggle, no fear, just rest. They buried her on a small rise overlooking the ranch. No marker, no name carved in stone. The land remembered. Years later, newcomers still ask why Reed Ranch feels different, why horses seem calmer, why storms do less damage, why the place feels watched over. Old-timers just smile. They say legends don't always wear saddles. Sometimes they're born in locked stables, left with nothing but a letter, and change everything without ever asking for credit.